Yeah.
We're about to go live, and I'm going to mute myself. And 1 second, please.
Now, we're expected to be partisan, aren't we, a little bit? I'm usually very bipartisan when I'm dealing with international relations, but if I'm going to keep up with Todd, I'm going to have to be partisan.
Exactly.
I'm going to try to keep the spirit bipartisan, but definitely make partisan points.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, go ahead. You're live. Thank
We
you.
are live, and we are going live on my Facebook page. So I'm going to start in Romanian, if you don't mind, because most of my audience is Romanian. Bună seara, dragilor, bine v-am găsit. Suntem în direct pe pagina mea de Facebook și o să trec direct în engleză pentru că în seara asta am invitați din Statele Unite și discutăm despre alegerile din Statele Unite. So, going back to English, first guest tonight is James Rosapep, which I remember from 1999, if I remember correctly. Big party at the American Embassy, 4th of July, my first 4th of July over there. Great ambassador. Glad to have you here with us tonight, Mr. Rosapep. I think you probably want to say a word before we start with our main guests, and probably you want to describe what they do, what their expertise is, and how we are not going to be objective tonight.
Happy to, and I want to thank you, Lucian, for agreeing to host it. Bringing your expertise to this is just incredibly valuable to all the viewers and listeners. As you mentioned, I was ambassador to Romania under President Clinton quite a long while ago, but I've remained active with Romania, and specifically on the board of Alianta, which is the sponsor and host of this conversation. It was founded about 10 years ago by another former ambassador, Mark Gittenstein, who, when he came back from Romania for being ambassador, he said it was not an organized enough effort among Americans concerned about the Romanian-American partnership in terms of security, in terms of business, in terms of culture. And so he got a group of us together to form Alianta. It's an American NGO open to everyone interested in the American-Romanian relationship. And we do a variety of things. For example, of particular interest to some of the people who are watching this, we've lobbied very hard for visa waiver for Romania. That's a big way to increase cultural exchange between America and the United States. We have hosted this series of conversations on economic topics, on charitable topics, on humanitarian topics, and today on political topics. And I want to thank my friends, Ambassador Gilmore and Ambassador Sedgwick, for joining us today. The three of us actually serve on the board of the Council of American Ambassadors, which is the alumni association for ambassadors. Everybody has an alumni association, even ambassadors do. And both of them have great expertise in the issues that are important to Americans interested in Romania and Romanians. Ambassador Gilmore was ambassador to the OSCE under President Trump. Ambassador Sedgwick was ambassador to Slovakia under President Obama. And both of them, based on that experience, but their activities since then, have kept very much on top of the issues in the region. And I think bring great perspectives. And obviously, Ambassador Gilmore is a Republican, a supporter of President Trump. Ambassador Sedgwick is a Democrat and a supporter of Vice President Harris. And so I think we have an opportunity today to hear perspectives of what does this election mean for people who care about the Romanian-American relationship. So thank you, and on with the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosapep. And first of all, I want to start with a thing that happened to me this summer, biking in America. And I went through a little village outside of nowhere, basically, with a few regular Americans having dinner and, playing pool and doing whatever you do on a weekend in a bar. And we had a chat. One of them was a Vietnam veteran. The other one was a guy who had a little farm. And they told me they've been through a lot, but this is their first time being worried about America. And this struck a chord with me because I've never heard something like that. Usually Americans are quite confident in their democracy. What's happening now? And this is a question for both of you. Who wants to start?
Governor, go ahead.
Okay, I'll begin. Let me just say a few things, then I'll go directly to your question. First of all, I'm happy to have a chance to be here. I was the United States ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe the OSCE, which deals with Europe, well, Northern Hemisphere really, but especially European-wide security issues. And while I was there, the Ukraine war was beginning to heat up, although Russia had not yet invaded. And I guess what I want to start by saying is that two things. First of all, as I make appearances like this and on the news and in speeches and news media, I'm a very partisan Republican. Make no mistake about that. And I support President Trump for his reelection. When I'm speaking on foreign policy issues in the clothes of an ambassador, I try to be nonpartisan. When I was United States ambassador, I recognized that I represented all the people of the United States, Democrats, Republicans, everybody, everywhere. So I wear two hats. And I think this particular meeting is asking me to wear both hats a little bit, and I will attempt to do that. Second of all, I want to make it clear that I do not speak for the Trump administration. I'm aware of the people that are around him. I am peripherally engaged in some of the transition issues in the campaign, but I'm not a spokesman in foreign policy for the Trump administration. So these views are my own here today. My experience in Vienna at OSCE, I think, has empowered me to think about these issues, particularly with respect to Romania and the acquaintancy that I had with Ambassador Cristian Estrata, of Romania to OSCE at that time. Lucian, I want to be responsive to you. The question is why you anecdotally ran into some people that said they were worried about America. Well, we're 340 million people, and you'll find people saying everything everywhere, from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, points of view, politics. But I do believe this. I believe that your example does reveal something that I too believe. And that is, I think the American people are angry. I think they're frustrated, they're worried, they're concerned. And I do think that's going to have an impact on this election that's coming up next week. I think the American people want to see a change. I believe that they're going to try to vote for a change. My personal opinion is that President Trump is going to be the candidate of that change. Todd may have a different point of view, but I'm reinforced by that, by the fact that my observation is that Kamala Harris has worked very hard over the last, I'd say 6 weeks, 30 days to 6 weeks, to try to make herself the change candidate. I've heard her say things like, let's turn the page, we break from the past. Those kinds of talks are her effort to make herself the change candidate, because I think she understands the Americans are ready for a change. I think she has failed. I think she's not being seen as the change candidate. And that's why I believe that President Trump, who is going to be representative of a change, is going to be elected to respond to this exact anxiety, Lucian, that you pointed out in your short meeting on the road.
These guys were worried. You are talking about anger, which is a bit different. And I want to move on to the other side of the aisle, to the Democratic point of view. Do you see anger in this campaign, and where do you think it comes from?
Yeah, I think that, thank you, Lucian. It's a real privilege to be able to participate in this panel, and I want to applaud the service of Mr. Ambassador Gilmore, both as governor of Virginia and as ambassador to the OSCE, which is a very underappreciated organization in Vienna. People need to learn more about the important role it plays in Europe and around the world. I was ambassador in Slovakia, which of course is a frontline country on the Russian border, just as Romania is. Ambassador Roosevelt mentioned Mark Gittenstein, who is the founder of Alianta, and I was just meeting with him in Brussels a couple of weeks ago. He's a good friend. I visited him in Bucharest when he was ambassador, and he visited me in Bratislava when I was ambassador. And I went to an anti-corruption conference in Bucharest with him. But in answer to your question, I think part of the problem is that President Trump has made a lot of efforts to undermine confidence in our election system repeatedly. He has still not recognized the results of the last election, which there were some 60 plus challenges in the courts to the election. They were all thrown out. And so and it's clear that he will, no matter what the results of the election are, this time it's clear that he's made it clear that he will not honor the results of this election, no matter what the votes will be. This is not the system that we believe in as Americans. And I'm on the board of the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, where we help governments around the world conduct elections. And this is certainly not the kind of example that we want to set for other countries. So I think that's part of it. But I think that, we're an old country. We've been through a lot of tumultuous times. And I think our institutions are strong enough to survive any threat. But I would say that there's President Trump has created a lot of turmoil, which has caused a lot of the anger.
Okay, we will discuss that. But first of all, since this is mostly a Romanian broadcast that I'm doing here, we would be very much interested if something changes for us and for Europe, of course, in each candidate's scenario for winning the election. So, Mr. Ambassador Gilmore, what do you think Donald Trump is going to do in the first, let's say, 6 months to 1 year of the mandate towards NATO? What his attitude should be towards NATO? Is it going to go forward with something that he mentioned a few times in his career, that the United States should leave NATO? What do you think he's going to do on Ukraine dossier, and what the peace plan might be in a Trump administration's vision? So where do you see the new administration, Trump, if that's going to happen, in relationship to Europe and Eastern Europe in specifically?
I'm very careful in broadcasts like this and panels like this not to hog all the time. So bear with me. But you just asked a question that would require an hour's response. So I think
we need to be a little bit short.
Let me try to summarize this. First, let me agree with Ambassador Sedgwick about one thing. Even though I think he's expressed some misgivings about Trump and what he's going to do. In my opinion, it doesn't make any difference what Trump wants to do. The United States Constitution is intact. My message to your viewers here today is the United States Constitution is intact. It has always been intact. It will always be intact. This is not like a post-Cold War color revolution or anything like that, where there were dramatic changes from authoritarian countries to democracies. And of course, in Romania, they knew exactly how to deal with an authoritarian leader, and that's not what America's about. In my opinion, America will vote. Its vote will have integrity. If it is complained about, the courts will deal with it. The courts are not controlled by either political party. Some people to the contrary, and the vote will be cast. And just like in the last election, Trump left office peaceably. Biden went in as president peaceably, and that's going to happen again. So I want to reassure your viewers of that, in my opinion. And I wouldn't worry about that. And I think, frankly, a lot of the hysteria talk in the campaigns is exactly that, in order to try to create fear and anxiety in the American electorate and to influence the vote. But it does not change the foundations of the American democracy and our constitutional system, in my view. Now, to get to your answer, though, look, I want to start by saying that I've taken a lot of time studying President Trump's foreign policy. I have my own particular views. I believe American leadership in Europe is essential. I believe we have to be a strong and powerful ally. I believe that NATO is an essential bulwark against Russian expansion and bad guys, and that it must remain intact, in my view. There are several things. I want to start by saying that I believe that President Trump's policy is not predictable. People to the contrary think that they can predict what he's going to do, and I don't believe that. And what I would like to do is get in a position to try to influence things in the right direction, but I have no confidence that I'll be able to do that. his statements towards NATO and towards Ukraine have not been something I would agree with. He has indicated skepticism of Ukraine, but he's a New York businessman, and he's always searching for leverage. And so he'll take a position in order to set himself up for a negotiating position, which then he deals with at a later time. And that's what Trump does. That's jarring to the American political system. They're used to people saying what they're going to do and then doing it. President Trump's different. And this is a different kind of candidate. And he sets himself up for negotiations. And so, but there are
basically what you're saying is that this is campaign talk, and you guys are going to moderate that and keep America on the right track. That always
that is what I'm hoping for, but I can't predict that.
It's just a hope, not a certainty.
I can't predict anything yet. I don't like some of the statements that have been made by our leading candidates with respect to Ukraine. I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine and the war. But let me point out just two or three things, then I'll turn it back over to Todd. Number one, President Obama didn't really support Ukraine at all. I think he sent some rations or something like that. It was a very weak message. And President Trump sent Javelin missiles in order to stop the Russian tanks at the beginning of that conflict. Recently, there was a Ukraine financing bill that was being held up in the House of Representatives. The Speaker of the House of Representatives flew to Florida and saw President Trump. They had a meeting. They came out together and supported that bill. And then that money was sent directly to Ukraine. So my message to you is that my hope and belief is that President Trump is a smart guy, and that when he really comes to understand the behavior of President Putin, I think he will not fold to President Putin. I believe he will not sell out Ukraine. I believe he will be a good ally to our friends in Eastern Europe, and especially including Romania. But I cannot say at this point what is going to happen. I know I can compare it to President Harris, Vice President Harris, and President Biden. And I think that the odds of success with President Trump exceed the record that we've already seen with President Biden and Vice President Harris, which I believe have been too little too late. That's my short answer.
Thank you. You know, some of us are old enough to have the golden Reagan standard when it comes to dealing with Russia, including me. I used to be some sort of sympathetic to Reagan republicanism at the time. Me. Because what had happened for us, it brought us freedom. Now, moving on to Ambassador Sedgwick, what is your take on that? What do you think is going to happen with Trump? And also, of course, should Kamala Harris win, what's going to happen under a Democratic administration with Eastern Europe?
Well, I'm very worried if Trump is elected, what's going to happen in Ukraine. I'm very worried. I think Romanians should be very worried because Trump he's repeatedly indicated that he has no affection for NATO, and he's told Putin to come on into any country that's not paying its bill in NATO, whatever that means. And the leading think tank that he's using now for his policies is called America First Policy Institute, and that means what it says, which is America first and to hell with everybody else. And so I think that now Biden, on the other hand, together with the Vice President Harris, have assembled our allies and believe in our alliances, contrary to President Trump, who have criticized our allies and shunned our allies. And he has this weird friendship with Vladimir Putin and his Russian cronies, which I don't quite understand. He's continued to maintain contact with the Russians, with Putin personally, since he left office. And, it's very strange, the relationship they have, and nobody really quite knows what that's all about. But I would be very worried because if he would, there's a decent chance that he would withdraw from NATO entirely. And that leaves all those countries on the border with Russia very vulnerable because I've always felt, well, those countries are safe because NATO will be there and come to the rescue. But if the United States withdraws, the United States has been the bulwark of NATO. If the United States withdraws, NATO it would be extremely weak and militarily not be able to defend Romanians. So I'd be very concerned. I think if, on the other hand, if Vice President Harris is elected, we'll have the same steady hand in Europe through NATO, and will defend Romanians and other countries from any aggression. I do worry about the other countries, for example, your neighbor, Moldova. I worry about the countries who are not in NATO, Georgia, Moldova, and but I do hope that Ambassador Gilmore has a significant role in the Trump administration, because I think I'm in complete agreement with him on his attitude and views about NATO and Ukraine. But I think Trump keeps talking about, I'm going to cut a deal with Russia, and that deal would be something like letting Russia keep all of what it's taken and then have a demarcation line. And we all know what the result will be, which simply is that he'll continue to, he won't honor, what agreement has he ever honored? None. And so he'll continue to advance westward and try to keep taking the entire Ukraine, and then move on to Moldova and even places in NATO, within NATO, Romania and others, assuming, and by the way, he's a great friend of Orban, and we know that Orban has designs on parts of Romania. So I would be very concerned if I were a Romanian over the results of this election.
Yes,
and I'd like to add something.
Yes, please.
Let me add, first of all, I agree with almost everything that Todd said. We just said,
you do.
just about everything. But there are one or two points that I think maybe I would like to make. Number one, I have some peripheral connection with this America First project, and they know exactly how I feel about foreign policy based on my experience. And the discussion there is America First does not mean America alone. I have been pushing for the fact that America First means a strong leadership role in NATO and in Europe. And I've made that point clear in the councils of that organization, that America First does not mean America alone. The point where President Trump said, well, Putin, come on in if they're not paying their dues, that is classic New York deal making. That's just setting himself up into a negotiating position where he has leverage. He can't mean that he expects Putin to come in anywhere that he wants to. What he's doing is communicating to our NATO members that they need to meet their obligations financially to strengthen the alliance. And
I think we all agree to that, and
yes,
Romania is doing its part for the time being.
But it wasn't until President Trump.
It was not. Yes.
Until this whole idea of the NATO members stepping up to the plate and spending a 2% on their GDP. And by the way, Romania has boosted themselves to 2.25. Mm-hmm. That entire program is entirely because of the initiative of President Trump, who came into office and said, this is what my expectations will be. And I think
also because of the war. I mean, we see a war near our borders, and we know we need to boost spending.
Well, yes, I think President Trump was perfectly obvious, and I think that Putin has been obvious.
But on the other hand, the reason we're worried here...
Lucian, he made that initiative before Putin made the invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Putin didn't do the invasion until Trump was already gone, and he was already pushing for that in his first term, rudely often sometimes, which I just don't do. But nonetheless, he's a different kind of guy, than most diplomats are.
Yes, but in many ways, people in Eastern Europe used to look at America like it's something that also gives some sort of moral attitude towards the world. It happened during the Cold War, when we knew that America was on the side of freedom, against tyranny, against the empire of evil. And now what we see, and it was no later than 2 days ago, Madison Square Garden, Tucker Carlson speaking at the Trump event. Tucker Carlson went to Moscow and actually... what he did in Putin interview and his various productions from Moscow was something that we all knew from communist times. It was pure propaganda. And, to have a guest as a guest at Madison Square Garden, a propagandist for Putin, does not sound very well for us in Eastern Europe, because he could have done without that. But he chose to have that guy over.
I agree with you completely. He shouldn't have had him at that rally at all. Tucker Carlson should not have gone to Moscow to give Putin a platform. I disagree. Not only do I disagree with Tucker Carlson, I disapprove of Tucker Carlson and think he should play no role in American government in any way, advisor or professional or in any other way. But that being said, by the way, I did watch that interview. He shouldn't have done it, but I did watch that interview. I'm not a member of the CIA, but I was pretty fascinated by the interview. I thought Tucker Carlson was inviting him to say anti-American things. He didn't. What he said was, this is my vision for the future, and he laid it all out there for everybody to see, which was a restoration of the Russian Empire. And that should advise all of us as to the reality that we're facing today.
Now, moving on to the Democrats, there's another thing that's happening in Eastern Europe. Russian propaganda is using the excesses of the left wing in America to show us that America is no longer worthy to be the beacon of freedom and democracy. They're using the cancel culture events. They're using the gay and lesbian scarecrow. They're using a lot of content that emanates from extreme left-wing America, and they somehow amalgamate this with regular mainstream democratic positions. How do you see an administration, Kamala Harris administration, dealing with that sort of perception and propaganda?
Well, it's a very difficult issue, and it's one which, of course, you're dealing with all over Europe, right? Because the EU
and in America too.
Yeah, in America too. But I'm saying is the Russians are trying to take advantage of these cultural cleavages all over Europe and the United States, and they're interfering in the elections in all these countries. But one thing they do is they go in and because a lot of these countries, for example, I was in Slovakia, there's a large Catholic population in Slovakia, so they'll go in and say, well, the European Union is the organization that promotes gay marriage and and decadence and so forth, and of course that resonates with some of these populations in Eastern Europe and the United States. So but we are who we are. We're a tolerant, multicultural country, and we should be proud of it and not change our ways because a dictator overseas is trying to take advantage of it.
I see. But at the same time, we can see, in Romania at least, we can see Russian propaganda moving both ways. On one hand, they're encouraging extreme right, and the other hand, they're encouraging or at least pushing narrative on the extreme left. What do you think can be done from a democratic perspective? What the media could do or the politicians could do to stop this propaganda war? Because it's going on and it's affecting elections all across the world. We had this in Moldova recently. Lots of propaganda outlets spreading lies on both sides of the divide.
Yeah,
what can democracies do without affecting the freedom of speech?
It's a very difficult issue. Same thing in Georgia, for example, and all over that area, part of the world, and in the United States. I think that the biggest thing we can do is just shed light on it. If you bring it to the public's attention, what the Russians are doing, and disclose everything we can find out through the NSA and CIA and all of our intelligence agencies, and show the people what's going on, and and try to through our cyber efforts stop the infiltration. We should make every effort to do all those things, but sunlight is the greatest disinfectant.
A very good infiltration is not really the word. I mean, you've got firm bots and troll farms roaming the former Twitter platform, for instance. There's totally crazy amount of propaganda being spewed every second on that platform. And algorithms are not taking that, they're not fighting that. They're actually encouraging that because it works. Propaganda is based on hate. We all know that. And hate moves people to write and interact and, produce engagement. That means money. So we have a little bit of a conundrum here.
Well, I do, it's a difficult issue. I'm not an expert in this area, but I do know that our intelligence agencies are quite effective in countering a lot of these measures, but we've got a lot more work to do.
Ambassador Gilmore?
Well, what I would add is this. Authoritarian countries like Russia, and China for that matter, have analyzed the West and looking for vulnerabilities in the West. And because we are an open society, and the West is an open society across the world, including now Romania, I think, they see that as a weakness. And this is an opportunity to move in and to offer this kind of misinformation and propaganda. I think the only possible way to address this is very much what Ambassador Sedgwick said. I think we put trust in the American people to understand these things. But what I believe one of the challenges we're facing now in the West is that we're not really explaining very well to the American people what's happening to them. We don't really alert them to the fact that some of these things are propaganda.
I know for a fact, and I can see every day, that some of the candidates are actually taking advantage of that propaganda. Trump was one of them.
Well,
he was helped by those bots.
Well, it depends. But look, the only thing that we can do is give information to the American people, and we expect that through our news media. And in my opinion, our news media is not doing that job. And for that matter, our government organizations are not doing the job either. They seem to be so frightened about being accused of something that they're quiet. And we really need people to educate the American people as to what the reality is. I might say, by the way, I have some things about the Trump foreign policy which I actually agree with, which I'd like to get around to telling you about when you're ready. But I want to be...
Yes, we are, because we have questions on China and tariffs and whatnot. But let me tell you something, that there are not just people from Romania tuning in. We have Mr. Ivanov from Ukraine. And he wants to know, he agrees with Governor Gilmore. The problem with President Biden and Vice President Harris is that their pro-Ukraine rhetoric does not match their lack of strategic support, says Mr. Ivanov. And but on the other hand, he says Trump is a wild card. I hope sensible people like Governor Gilmore will have favorable influence over Trump should he win.
Well, I can't predict that. All I can do is all I can do is the best I can do. But I must say, I think Mr. Ivanov's view is actually very representative of what I believe is going on in Ukraine. I believe that Ukraine is frustrated and threatened and in danger. And I believe that they're frustrated because the Biden-Harris administration has not supported Ukraine to the extent that they should. As I think I said earlier, it's too little, too late. And I believe that is the case. They're not giving them enough because, I'll be frank with you, and again, Ambassador Sedgwick can choose to disagree with me on this. I think President Biden has been intimidated by Vladimir Putin. Putin threatened him very early on with a nuclear war. I think that President Biden has decided he's not going to leave the presidency having started a nuclear war. And I think he's been reluctant, frightened, and uncertain in his approach. They talk a lot about what they're going to do, and they've given money. But frankly, they're so tentative that I think that it just encourages Putin and his misconduct. You have to be a strong person. You have to give a strong message. And I don't believe that we've seen that out of this administration. Now, I do not give you any guarantees as to what President Trump's going to do. I said at the beginning of this, I think it's unpredictable. But he is a strong individual. And I think that
traditionally for us in Eastern Europe, we saw the Republicans as the hawks and the Democrats as the doves. But I remember Trump visiting Moscow, meeting Putin. He seemed more like a dove to me at the time.
Well, you never know, do you? But I think that at the end of the day, my hope is that we will all recognize our national interests. And I am of the very strong view and articulate very strongly that America's own safety and security is dependent upon the freedom, friendship, and of Europe. That's the way I conducted myself as ambassador at OSCE, and I still feel it today. It's essential to the United States' safety and security. And that's why when I hear things like, well, we're giving charity to Ukraine, or they're taking too much money, or Zelensky comes and takes too much money, they're focused on what we're doing for Ukraine. What actually is at work here is America's safety and security. Ukraine's success makes America safer. In fact, it's essential to our security, in my view.
Now, Ambassador Sedgwick, do you care to answer to this idea that Democrats are weak on Ukraine and afraid of Putin and nuclear war?
Yeah, I don't agree with any of that, but I will say that I totally agree with Ambassador Gilmore's last statement that we really need to think of this Ukrainian situation as being a matter of American security. And I can't believe that people wouldn't recognize that this amount of money, I can't believe people would recognize that without having to commit any of our own soldiers, that we'd have this opportunity with this amount of money, which given the totality of our budget is not a tremendous amount, to degrade the Russian military, which is what we've been trying to do for decades. And it's succeeding, by the way. No one's talking about how the Russians, everyone's talking about the Ukrainian side, but no one's talking about how much damage we've incurred to the Russian military.
Yeah, well, the way we see it right now, the front line is collapsing in some points. I'm not seeing degrading of the Russian army. It's more like they're gaining expertise, they're gaining experience, they're hardening from a battle point of view. The Ukrainians are not doing well right now.
Well, I will say that Biden and Kamala Harris have marshaled the efforts of all the Europeans, and the Europeans don't get enough credit. The Europeans have actually contributed 2/3 of the total support, military support for Ukraine. And that's thanks to the United States marshaling all those resources all over Europe. And I think the Harris and Biden administration have been going as fast as they can, but they've been hampered in many cases by the Congress. So we're going full speed ahead at the moment, but we need to get through, it's like every 6 months we have to get approval for another package and so forth. So it's not entirely the fault of the executive branch.
Okay, let's move on to something more palatable to Romanian viewers. Something funnier than this war, because we're all tired of it. So how about we discuss communism versus socialism versus capitalism? Because, there's this debate that the Republicans are the capitalists and the Democrats are the socialists. And could you, give us an overview of what is now your official doctrine when it comes to economic realities? And what can we expect from the respective administrations should they win?
Well, I think that Democrats tend to, over the years, Democrats have tended to be more, I would say, generous toward lower income societies. And now a lot of times the Democrats are accused of socialism. Socialism has a specific definition, which is that the government takes over the means of production, which is the last thing that the Democrats are trying to do. The Democrats are capitalists, and as Kamala Harris has indicated in her campaign, she's a capitalist, and she's very pro-business. And there's a difference of emphasis on Republicans and Democrats on how to spend the money. But make no mistake, the Democrats are not socialists. I think that word is bandied about, but I would compare the Democratic policies to some of maybe the Scandinavian countries where they would spend more money on retirees and education and health and that kind of thing than other countries. But it doesn't mean those countries in Scandinavia are socialists. They're not socialists.
Yes, but
they're capitalists. They're very successful capitalist countries.
The perspective here is that some people just want to spend other people's money without any kind of control, and they're giving away too much to people who do not deserve it. That would be the capitalist critique on that. How do you feel about the new capitalist course, Mr. Gilmore, should Trump win?
Well,
what's going to happen?
This is a subtle point. Look, I mean, communism is just socialism with interrogation cellars and secret police. Frankly, but look, I think that it's correct. I think that Americans are all capitalists, but there is a difference in point of view, and that is that I think the Democratic Party is much more comfortable with the redistribution of wealth through taxation. They like that. And that too, I wouldn't be quite as harsh as maybe the way you said it, but it is true. It's fundamentally true that taking too much money from people who are taking all the risk, applying all the capital, all the job creation, all the things for shareholders, all the investment, and just diminishing that and taking the money through taxation and giving it to other people for a political reason destroys incentive. If you take away the ability to get rich and to make money, then there's no reason to invest all your time, effort, and risk. Capitalists lose money all the time. They invest their money, they even borrow money, and they lose that money because their ventures don't succeed. I think that my critique of the Democratic Party is I don't think they have a full appreciation of that, and that they need to follow a policy that enhances investment and opportunity and growth, because then people have an opportunity to work and do things. Now, I do think, by the way, in terms of industrial policy, President Trump has set it a correct direction. And that is that for years, the United States behaved as though we were at peace. And so we, did things with China that each could do positive things for each other and economically. And we've been very generous across the world in terms of helping our friends and so on. And I think President Trump has said enough. The time has come to actually make sure that everybody else in the world carries their weight. And that is, I think, that his firm message. I believe that we're probably going to bring back more industrial capacity to the United States. And frankly, in my view, we are in a war, a hybrid war across the world, and it's going to be necessary for us to make adjustments to that war. We're going to have to be prepared for a conflict. We're going to have to be prepared to fight a conflict. And if we are, then maybe there will never be a conflict. Maybe we can still go back to the notion of deterrence, which right now is failing worldwide.
I want to interrupt you for a little bit because we have people commenting. And I want to congratulate Mr. Gabriel Mihai, who says, the moderator's anti-Trump bias is so visible, very much alike with pro-Putin stance of Tucker Carlson. Gabriel Mihai is a Romanian. And I want to say, yes, there is a bias here. I do not like friends of people who are throwing journalists out of the window because I'm a journalist. So, yes, I have that kind of bias.
Then you should stay away from Moscow.
Yes, I will, definitely. Also, we have a question from Alina Sâmpetru of Beyond Borders magazine. She says she wants to know, how can you be more effective ambassadors for this strategic partnership between Romania and the United States? What can you and can we do more towards that?
Well, I think that Alianta is a very effective organization. I applaud Ambassador Rosapep and Ambassador Gittenstein for getting that started. I've attended their galas for many years. And I don't have any direct role, since I was ambassador to Slovakia, I don't have any direct role in U.S.-Romanian relations, but I am involved in a number of issues, as is Ambassador Gilmore, in Eastern and Central Europe, broadly speaking. I will say that there's I do help with American-Romanian relations because the Romanian ambassador to the United States, when I was over there in Slovakia, I had started a rock and roll band, and the guy who was the Romanian ambassador to Slovakia is in our band. And so with music, we improve international relations.
What did you play?
I play the keyboard. He plays the guitar. We have the Israeli ambassador in the band. We have
your own compositions, or you just a cover band?
I told them I wasn't good enough to play, and then they said we're just going to play classic rock and roll, old stuff, 60s. So we play Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Smoke on the Water, Santana, very simple things. I don't know any music after 1975, so we play old stuff. We have a blast, and the Romanian ambassador is one of my dear friends, and so we use music to improve relations.
Now,
I'd like to see that.
There's a follow-up to that question, and how the Romanian diaspora can be more effective. Maybe you have recommendations for us and for Romanians living in the United States to get those countries closer together and get more cooperation.
Well, Ambassador Gilmore, I'll just say one thing very briefly and then turn over the floor to you. But I think that, I really encourage diaspora of any country to get involved in the relationship with the United States, which you can do through advocacy to the State Department, to many countries do this, but I've noticed that many countries are much more reticent to do this. And so I would encourage the Romanian diaspora to become active and engage with a number of the think tanks around town that are SEPA, for example, is one of them, and there are all kinds of think tanks around town that lobby and can be effective. But Ambassador Gilmore, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Frankly, I think that's a very difficult question because it goes to the heart of the American Republic and democracy about how we influence policy and influence events. My advice to our Romanians that are living in the United States is, if you're now Americans, be Americans and be supportive of the United States and try to encourage this relationship with Romania. I will tell a quick story. When I got to Vienna, one of my first visits, I made reference to Cristian Estrate, the Romanian ambassador to OSCE. I met with him very early on when I was there. And frankly, I didn't really know anything about Romania very much. And so I kind of said, well, Ambassador, you're right there near the border with Russia. I assume that Romania is pro-Russian and that my duty is to try to bring you over toward the West. And he said, absolutely not. He said, we are not in favor of Russia. We are tied to the West. We're in the EU. We are in the Western alliances. And make no mistake about it, Romania is a committed friend to the United States of America and American leadership. And I felt a lot better, and I had a nice lunch after that. So I think that the interesting thing about America is that ethnic groups in the United States, they tend to love the home country, the old country, and to try to influence things, and I would encourage that. But never forget, if you're an American, you're an American. Whether you're an Irish American, African American, or a Romanian American, you're an American, and you ought to want the success of our current nation, which I believe in.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I have a sad news for you right now. Around 20% of people voting this year are probably voting for parties that are not openly, but they're pro-Russian in their initiatives and in their behavior. They're voting against Ukraine, for instance, in the European Parliament. Their representatives there. So we are not 100% against Russia anymore. And some internal forces are driving us towards a closer relationship with Russia. And funny enough, those forces are a sovereign type of conservative that is also a Trump sympathizer.
Yeah, it's very sad to see some of the congressmen not being aware that a lot of the talking points that they're using in Congress are actually word for word Russian propaganda.
Happens here too.
Yeah.
Well,
with some politicians, and they're the most patriotic of them all. You know, they drape themselves in the Romanian flag and they wave it all the time, and only us, that's kind of a Romania first attitude towards politics.
well, you can have it's all about education and learning. You can have Romania first, but Romania first is better off if they're allied with the United States of America. That's putting Romania first. I think that Romania allied with Russia would be putting Romania last. So they've got to be thoughtful about what they're doing. But I want to make maybe a larger point. The reason that I feel so strongly about the Ukrainian war is because I know what Putin's trying to do. If he can collapse Ukraine and turn it into a vassal state, or maybe conquer it whole like he attempted to do, and then move into Moldova and begin to threaten other Western countries, eventually these other political parties that are more pro-Russian become exactly the Trojan horse for Putin's long-term goal. And that, I think, is the risk that we all need to understand as we consider the Ukrainian war. The Ukrainian war is a moment when we can really stop this Russian expansion. And I might say that in my view, and I'm not completely an expert in this, but I read a lot about it, looks to me like that the Russians can't last. They've lost 600,000 people. Their economy is a shambles. President Trump has said that he intends to boost up America's energy policy if he becomes president. Energy security and creating energy resources is going to be a principal American goal. That could collapse the price of oil in a way that would really cripple Putin, because he didn't have anything else but oil at this point. So I repeat what I said again. I believe that this is a pivotal moment, and that's why I'm taking the position that I'm taking, and I believe it's pro-American and putting America first.
All right. We are about to close. I think we have a few more minutes, and there are a few comments alluding to the idea that the West in general, America, but also Europe, is gradually losing influence on the global scale. The factories are no longer in the West. The innovation is moving towards China. And towards the East, and towards the countries that are not democracies. What do you think can stop this gradual sliding of the Western civilization into, let's say, not the end of the empires, as some of them will say, but towards a more insignificant role on the global stage, economically and politically?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with the premise more. I mean, all of the innovation in AI and, thinking on in universities, on tech, it all comes from the lion's share comes from the United States, venture capital. I mean, if you look at I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but I'm guessing something like 80% of the real innovation and technology and high-tech innovation comes out and now the new field of artificial intelligence. It's all coming out of the United States. So I'm really not worried about that myself. But I don't know. I think we're still the leader.
Oh, still, of course, but it's not going up. It's going a little bit downwards.
Nah.
Factories, as I said, the factories are moving towards China. Production is over there. They tend to do more and more research, and they tend to excel in some areas. For instance, electric cars. They own the batteries right now. They own strategic resources such as lithium batteries. They're into chip production right now. So they're trying to steal away the thunder from the Western economies. Europe is not doing so well itself.
Well, I don't think the United States has to have a corner on everything. But in agreement with Ambassador Sedgwick, we almost do. Look, we are higher than a $20 trillion economy. The next economy is China, which is about 12. And the quality of those two economies is radically different. The United States is a powerful, strong economic force, and everybody knows it. Really, there's no reason to play coy about this. The United States is still the power player in the world and should be, because of the other thing that I would say, Lucian, and that is that we are a moral people with values. We do believe in the democracy. And democracy in America is not going anywhere. I don't know what your listeners think because of all the Russian propaganda we see in our news media. The United States isn't going anywhere. We're a strong constitutional democracy. We're a strong economy. Our wisdom and our education is strong, and we're going to continue to do that. But mostly, my observation, based on my experience, is the people of the world are with us. They want to be free people, and particularly in Eastern Europe. They have the distinct experience of living in an authoritarian Russian empire, and they want no part of it. And that's why they're gravitating to the big player in the world that can actually provide them some leadership, and that's the United States.
All right. Closing statements. Why should Romanian Americans vote for your preferred candidate?
Who goes first?
Well, again, I think that the Biden-Harris ticket is a much more steady hand at the tiller in terms of providing security and peace in Eastern Europe. We believe in NATO, we believe in our allies, and I think that the Trump administration has shown that they really don't believe in alliances, and they have this, as I say, odd relationship between Trump and Putin, which makes me very uneasy. It should make Romanians very uneasy. And NATO is really the solution for peoples of Eastern Europe, and we need to make sure that NATO stays intact. And by the way, I served on the Obama administration, and I give Trump credit for getting the Eastern Europeans and Europeans across Europe to boost their defense spending. We did as well, and so I think it's a mistake just to say that Trump alone did that. We did. Obama did that as well. I mean, I did it in Slovakia and others did it around Europe. But I think that the old liberal international order that we've had since World War II, really the international architecture that was started by Dean Acheson and those geniuses who really established the order in Europe and the United States, the transatlantic alliance that's worked so well for us ever since World War II, stability and peace in the United States and Europe, it's really under threat by Donald Trump in so many ways that we've been discussing. So I think that the Harris administration would be much more safe bet for Romanians.
All right. Trump?
Well, I'll do the best I can. First of all, I agree with much of what Ambassador Sedgwick just said, particularly with respect to NATO and our allies and that kind of leadership. But look, it seems to me that Romanians have to ask themselves a difficult question. And that is, are you happy with the Biden-Harris foreign policy? Has it worked for Ukraine? Has it worked for Eastern Europe? Has, in fact, it slowed up Putin? Has that foreign policy worked? Now, never mind the domestic problems, which I could talk another hour about, which I don't agree with. But in terms of foreign policy, I believe that policy has not worked. Now, on the other side, on the Trump side, frankly, I think that it is a risk. I think that it's a gamble because they've said some things that I don't agree with. And I hope that I can be persuasive in getting them to do what I believe is the right thing. But there are some positive signs. Energy security and production, reindustrializing the United States to prepare for the hybrid and real war that we're actually in. The track record that we've seen, that frankly is not the same thing as this rhetoric. And finally, I think that all of the hysteria about dictatorship and threat to democracy is just nonsense. The American Constitution is intact. The American democracy is strong. And I think we're going to come through this election no matter what.
All right. Thank you so much. Last question. Are we getting our visa waivers this year, next year? I'm deeply interested.
I think it's up to Ambassador Sedgwick.
I think it's up to Ambassador Roosevelt.
Too many ambassadors to count. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you guys for watching, for tuning in. And if you found out...
Thank you for being a terrific moderator, Lucian. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And thank you to my friend, Ambassador Gilmore.
And likewise.
Thank you so much. And if you liked it, if you think it's interesting for your friends, guys, people watching this channel right now, please do share it and please do talk about it. Thank you, Alianta, for having me here. And I'll see you next time. I'll see you in DC maybe, because I'm coming there next week. I'll be broadcasting live from New York, DC on the 5th and 6th of November, and then back from New York with Romanians voting in America. Thank you very much
I'll be there next